Hello, welcome back to Ever17, the Out of Infinity. I really need to know more about what's going on. There is one path with Takeshi that takes place in 2017, and one path with the kid that takes place in 2034. Okay, I get all the important stuff. The U's are different, Tsugumi is the same person, and the kids are different. The kid in this path is named Hokuto. Now, I want to know who the heck is the kid in Takeshi's path, and who the heck is the Takeshi in the kid's path? In the year 2017, May 7th, 11 a.m., the men from the Blick were waiting for Tsugumi when she got to the floating island. Tsugumi, a carrier of the cure virus. To them, she was a valuable sample. Their eyes glaring and mouths half open, she could see their dark, wet tongues. It was almost possible for Tsugumi to smell the reek of their excitement, like the smell of men lusting after flesh. It was a fetid stench, greasy and rotten, for it was Tsugumi's body that they were after. What they wanted was nothing more than to perform human experiments under the pretext of making the ultimate human dream come true. By using Tsugumi's body, they were planning to gain knowledge, fame, and fortune. That was indeed their desire. "We've been waiting for you," one of them took a deep bow. Behind his veneer of politeness was an evil that threatened to spill forth, making Tsugumi sick to her stomach. Some of the others in his entourage licked their lips, swallowing their saliva like dogs gone mad with the hunt. That instant, Tsugumi kicked hard off the ground, breaking into a run. She ran across the wide surface of the huge artificial island, desperately scaling the high surrounding fence, and fled into the nearby foliage. Their cacophony of screams and angry cursing faded behind her. Tsugumi hid and waited until nightfall. She held a single hamster to her chest. At night, a supply-carrying vessel slipped out of the floating island's port. Tsugumi had stowed away on the vessel, hiding herself among the cargo. She was headed to the mainland. From that moment on, Tsugumi's life was consumed with one thought: how to escape from them. Although she wasn't a criminal, she avoided people, preferring to hide in the darkness, all the while threatened by ominous feelings of being hunted. Nothing changed after she safely made it to land. Every few weeks she moved from a town to a different town, wandering in the darkness. She slept under bridges, under backstreet caves, pipes pouring out into the ocean, and even in public restrooms. It was an endless cycle of running. She never had a second's peace. She couldn't turn to the police. She had no place to live. Her identity was uncertain, and her age and appearance didn't match. The police would only doubt her. Information regarding Tsugumi had spread through the national police network. It was only a matter of time before Blick would find her. Blick's influence even extended to national politics. There was nothing else for Tsugumi to do but continue to hide in the back alleys. She hated Blick. They had destroyed everything Tsugumi had cared about and made her life a living hell. What's more, they had taken away the love of her life, Takeshi Kurinari. She wanted to get revenge on Blick with every fiber of her being. Tsugumi came to hate this world, and her heart became even more hardened to it. 2 months had passed. It was summertime. All of a sudden, she began feeling sick. She knew she had stopped menstruating, but she didn't want to think about the possibility. She went to visit an illegal doctor who was well known in the back streets. Tsugumi was pregnant. She was sure it was Takeshi's baby. She'd never been with anyone else. She was pregnant. At night, she went to the deserted coastal area of a small nearby town. There were nothing but printed factories and abandoned houses. Unsure if it was a river or the ocean, she sat on a boat dock looking at a neon sign by the highway. She touched her stomach. She felt a sense of awe and joy at the fact there was life growing in her stomach and that it was connected to her. The neon light glittered and flickered off of the water's surface. Tsugumi looked at the lights with her hands on her stomach. Realizing that Takeshi's babies were inside her, she couldn't stop crying. They might have only been only an inch big at that time, but the survival of the two babies outstripped the needs of the mother's body that surrounded them. Tsugumi almost had the illusion that it wasn't her who bore the children, but it was actually they who bore her. Everything that she was, she poured into her two babies. She felt that she was part of the babies, not the other way around. It was then that Tsugumi decided to sacrifice everything for the two tiny lives. Love was a concept to her, but if love could be brought into physical form to her, it seemed it must be the babies in her stomach. That was it. Love was growing in her stomach. Takeshi and Tsugumi's babies. Before long, the hatred she had felt towards everything had disappeared without a trace. For the first time, Tsugumi felt as though there were a higher power guiding her life. 7 months later, January 21st, 2018, Tsugumi was suddenly struck with contractions. When they came, the back alley doctor had gone somewhere. She visited a nearby clinic. She had no medical insurance, no identification. Most importantly, she had no money. When he found out that she couldn't pay, the doctor beat Tsugumi as though she were a stray animal. With nowhere else to go, the two babies were born in an old boat shack. An old woman was living there, but Tsugumi could not tell whether she lived there or was just sleeping there temporarily. It was this old woman who helped Tsugumi through the birth. "Oh, how precious, so precious. You've done a fine job, dearie." The old lady repeated this many times as she gently rinsed the babies in a tin basin. The sweat-covered Tsugumi was lying down, with only a thin towel between her and a hardwood floor. Tsugumi's eyes gazed unfocused out a nearby window. Snow was falling outside. "How darling. Yes, a precious boy child and a girl. Which one will you hold first?" The legal doctor had told her, so she was expecting twins, but she never imagined that they would be fraternal. A bit surprised, she said, "Both at the same time." Wrapped in an old cloth, Tsugumi gently held them to her chest. "Not to worry, my dearie. I boiled them cloth and the scissors that would cut their cord in hot water good, I did." "Thank you." Tsugumi thanked her. Thank you very much." She gave thanks for the two lives who had been born safely. "Thank you." And these last words were directed toward the deep darkness beyond the window. The snow was falling. The two babies pressed to Tsugumi's chest with eyes closed, let out small yawns. The cure virus. Soon after she had given birth, Tsugumi's thoughts were turned to the possibility, if they got infected by cure while they were inside of me, and if their DNA was altered just like me. Tsugumi visited the legal doctor. "Don't worry about it," he explained, laughing. According to taxonomic classification, a pure human would belong to primates, anthropoida, hominoid, Homo genus sapiens. Tsugumi, whose DNA information was altered by the cure virus, was not a pure human anymore, but rather a subspecies of it. Let's just call you subspecies cure for now. Now any kids who were born from Takeshi, the Homo sapien, and Tsugumi, the cure, would technically be a hybrid. Now, by the way, I guess I should tell you that the cure virus only infects pure humans, the Homo sapiens. So there's no way the cure virus possibly affected your two little hybrids there. While not much is known about the cure virus, some of the unique functions scientists have discovered, such as regenerating telomeres and regenerative healing, are inherited recessively. For blood types, without exception, all children born from a type AA father and a type AA mother, for instance, can only be type AO with a type A predisposition. Why? Because type A factors are inherited dominantly and type O factors are inherited recessively. In order for a child to be blood type to be type O, you'd have to have a mixture of either AO times AO, AO times BO, AO times OO, BO times BO, BO times OO, or OO times OO. It can only be one of the above, meaning that both the parents gotta add that type O factor to the genetic milkshake. Same goes for the cure virus. Any child born from a pure-blooded sapiens and cure will all be sapiens cure and inherit the dominant physical traits of both. For them Rugrats to become full-blooded cure, the parents would have to be cure x cure, sapiens cure x cure, or sapiens cure x sapiens cure. Any of those combinations, meaning that both parents have to be a part or all cure. And since these two little critters were born from a pure sapiens and pure cure, they'll have the same physical traits as a pure human and won't possess the cure traits like perpetual youth. So you don't have nothing to worry about, alright? The doctor held up the two babies Tsugumi had brought and laughed again. Tsugumi didn't know his background. It was probable that he had been part of Blick's laboratory staff in the past, since he knew so much about the cure virus. But he didn't seem to be one of them. Tsugumi figured she could trust him. Among outcasts, there is an unspoken law. You don't go nosing around in other people's pasts. Tsugumi didn't ask him anything more, and he didn't demand to know about her either. A year after giving birth, it was winter again. Tsugumi had rented a tiny room and lived together with the two babies. Of course, Chemi was there as well. It was a quiet, rustic little coastal town. It wasn't a city or tourist town. No fishing or farming. Nothing. Just a dreary port town. During the day, Tsugumi worked... Yep, they misspelled Tsugumi one time. Yep. For next June, nothing at a ceiling factory while the babies stayed at a daycare center. She spent every day glued to a sewing machine from early morning to 4 p.m. and after that she would spend time with the babies. Her wages were very low and of course they were poor. She couldn't even afford disposable diapers. Tsugumi collected small scraps of cloth leftovers from the factory and sewed diapers and clothes for the babies. Despite the harsh living conditions, the babies were growing healthily. Their life was a peaceful one, and although they were poor, the poverty didn't threaten them. They were content. The three of them were always smiling. Mama, Mama, ah, Jimmy, Jimmy. They were already beginning to talk. The boy had started walking a few steps at a time. The girl was able to stand barely as she held on to things. The girl had begun to speak. Oh, Jimmy, Jimmy, which was very unusual for a 1-year-old. The boy, it seemed, grew faster physically, and the girl grew faster intellectually. Tsugumi tenderly watched over their cute gestures. She was filled with happiness. May 7th, 2019. The two babies were 15 months old. Tsugumi had taken them to the beach. The boy ran around the sand, falling and getting back up over and over. The girl was sitting by the water, putting her hands in the waves. She was giggling, saying, "Cold, so cold." Watching out over the flat surface of the ocean, Tsugumi's thoughts turned to Takeshi. "So live, as long as you're alive. Live, don't worry, I'm not going to die." Those were Takeshi's last words to her. It had been 2 years already. "I'm not going to die." After saying that, he sunk to the bottom of the ocean, protecting the woman he loved, protecting the children right in front of her. "You fool, you're a liar," Tsugumi whispered to the ocean, but at the same time, she still hadn't given up hope. "No, he must be alive somewhere. He's a man of his word." Just then, a wave swallowed the girl who had been playing near the edge of the water. For an adult, it would hardly have reached their shin, but for a 1-year-old baby, it was as big as tsunami. As big as a tsunami. The girl disappeared in a splash of water and was sucked out into the ocean like a piece of driftwood by the tide. Tsugumi ran as hard as she could, held back by the resistance of the sand. But before she could get there, something unbelievable happened. The boy, who was only 1 year and 3 months old, jumped into the water and saved the girl. Hardly able to believe what she had seen, Tsugumi rushed toward them. She carried them to dry sand. The girl started crying. The boy, seemingly unaware of what had happened, looked at his sister crying. A few seconds later, he fell over as all his strength had left him. That night, both of them came down with a high fever. It was summertime. 1.5 years had passed since the birth. All of that time in the past 1.5 years had been filled with happiness. Nothing special had happened, and that was why it had been so peaceful. The boy was a wild one. Tsugumi could hardly take her eyes off of him for a second. He constantly was putting everything, even Chami, in his mouth. Jammy. Yeah. And any electric appliance that he touched seemed to break, and he wouldn't stop jamming metal wires into the outlets. The girl wasn't quite as much of a challenge, since she moved about less, but still Tsugumi had to put up with her stubbornness. But she refused to eat things she didn't like, and when she got in a bad mood, she wouldn't stop fussing. And no matter how much Tsugumi warned her, she wouldn't stop playing with her brother's hair. And she would always demand for more Jimmy. Those days were filled with being buffeted about by her 2 rambunctious children, but no matter how challenging, even those days were filled with happiness. At night, all 3 of them slept together, cuddled up on a thin mattress. Mama, Jimmy. Talking in their sleep, the 2 babies sought their mother's touch. Looking down at their sweet, innocent gestures, Tsugumi felt bliss she had never known. One day, her peaceful world was shattered to bits. It all happened so unexpectedly. Caught up in her life of happiness, Tsugumi had forgotten to watch out for them. She didn't know how they had found out, but they had somehow gathered information and showed up without warning. Them, the people from Blick Winkel. With no time to collect anything, all Tsugumi could bring with her was her 2 babies and her hamster as she fled. So they ran, but it was obvious to Tsugumi that eventually Lilik would hunt them down. As they continued running, Tsugumi thought to herself, even if I could keep escaping, would it really be happiness for the 2 children? They wouldn't be able to go to school, and it would be too hard on them to keep moving from town to town. Besides, if we ever got caught, what would they do to my children at Blick? It's too dangerous for them to be with me. Tsugumi made up her mind. She researched an orphanage she could trust and decided to leave them there. The 2 children were just too young. Even if Tsugumi had tried to explain, they couldn't have understood. With no other option, she left the pendant she had kept with her, making a wish as she gave it. I will come back for you. I will come to get you. I promise. Being too young to understand the situation, the 2 children just stared at their mother, crying. Weeping bitter tears, Tsugumi looked back many times as she walked away. All she had now was Chami. From Tsugumi's chest pocket, Chami looked up at her face in puzzlement, but even Chami's cute gestures could do little to ease Tsugumi's broken heart. She spent many nights in the depth of despair, crying in her sorrow. A few years later, by the time Tsugumi went back to the orphanage, the children were already gone. From that time on, she had gone through life no more than an empty husk. Until that day, until that very moment, Tsugumi had kept searching for her children, wandering through darkness. Tsugumi finished telling her story and closed her eyes gently. She never once mentioned the names Hokuto or Sarah in the story. Because those names weren't the names Tsugumi had given them, someone else had named them Hokuto and Sarah. I left Tsugumi and Sarah. If I could, I wanted to stay with them forever, but it wasn't possible. There were still many unsolved matters that I needed to take care of. Listening to Tsugumi's story had caused me to suddenly remember something. I had received a phone call before coming to Limu. Over the phone, a voice had said to me, "If you come to Limu, you can see your mother and sister." Oh, so that was it. Before the accident took place, I had been waiting for someone at the rest area. It must have been my mother and Sarah. Tsugumi must have been roped into coming to Limu in the same way I was. Wait, roped in? What for? I still didn't know the answer to that. But I had some clues. The voice on the phone had been male. Without a doubt, I knew whose voice it had been. I ran to him. You aren't Takeshi Kurinari! Barging into the rest area, I demanded an answer from the man in front of me. I couldn't call him Takeshi anymore. This guy had been deceiving us the whole time. Don't play dumb! I know that the real Takeshi is Sarah's and my father. No, not you! Sarah and I are the children of Takeshi and Tsugumi. I keep telling you, you're not Takeshi. I'm talking about Takeshi from the other world. The world back in 2017. On January 21st, 16 years ago. In 2018. I don't know, I just do. What do you expect me to do about it? Besides, we're not talking about me now. Who are you anyway? And why did you lie about the year 2017? Why are you pretending to be Takeshi Kurinari? What was the reason you tried to trick us by repeating the same incident as 17 years ago, and by using the same words? 少年、よく考えてみろよ。俺がもしも仮に2017年の出来事を繰り返してるとしてもだ。2018年に生まれたお前のことを騙せるはずがないだろ。現実的に考えれば17年前と同じことが起きていると
お前に信じ込ませることは不可能なんだよ。わかるか？それより、どうして同じ出来事だとわかる？どうして同じ言葉を言っているとわかる？どうしてお前は自分が生まれる前の歴史なんかを知ってるんだ？そろそろ正体を表したらどうなんだ？お前は一体何者なんだ？
Somehow I couldn't say a word. Who am I anyway? So the same question was repeated in my mind.
そうかそうか。自分の話になると突然だんまりですか。わかったよ。だったらまずは俺の本当の名前を教えてやろう。そう、お前が言ったように俺は倉成武士ではない。俺の本当の名前は鏑木良吾。鏑木良吾。
And who is this guy? Okay.
思い出したんだ。僕の名前。
The kid repeated it slowly.
古い
Oh.
木。
Oh.
剣。
Ryoba Kaburaki. So I see. Oh, it's younger him. Way to go. Oh, I smiled and patted his head. The young Kaburaki smiled shyly. Without a word, the young Kaburaki went behind the statue and started scratching. He had a screwdriver in his hand. Ryogo Kaburaki. With thin, sharp writing, the young Kaburaki carved his name deeply into the statue. He must have been pretty happy to have remembered his name. Or was it that he wouldn't forget it again? Although I didn't know the reason he carved his name into the statue. He continued on. Without stopping his hands, he also carved the following letters. Coco Yakumi. Yobise Harakana Tanaka. Tsugumi Komachi. Sora Kanegasaki. Takeshi Kurunari. Pipi and Jamie. The young Kaburaki carved all of our names who had been confined here. He smiled happily after finishing up. The statue kept silent with its hand on the chest. Okay, that boy's name was also Ryogo Kaburaki, which meant that the kid from the 17 years ago and this guy pretending to be Takeshi were actually the same person? He looked so young that it was hard to believe it had been 17 years. If the young Kaburaki was 15 years old, that would make him 32 years old in this world. But the Kaburaki I spoke to looked around 20. There was no way he could have been over 30 years old, which meant... Before I realized it, the man who called himself Kaburaki had disappeared. He had left a while before. I'd been standing there lost in thought for some time. I remembered back to the scene in 2017, which I had just witnessed earlier. I went around one of the statues as if being called over to it. On its back were carved childish stick figures. 6 human-like figures and 2 unfamiliar animal shapes were drawn there. What? I looked at the statue. The statue pointed south. I looked at the back of other statues as well. Surprisingly, there were similar drawings on the statue pointing to the sky. There were also 6 people's names, and as well as Pipi and Chemi carved into the statue, which stood with its hand in its chest. On its chest. There was no writing on the statue pointing east. Oh, just what is this supposed to mean? What is up with this world anyway? Puzzled and confused, my head felt like it was about to explode. I didn't know things that I was supposed to know. I knew things that I wasn't supposed to. That must be why my head is so confused. I still haven't recalled any of my memories. Some parts of it had come back, but nothing really important. To begin with, I still didn't know what kind of person this Hokuto was. And at the same time, I knew that what I wasn't supposed to know, and I could see what I wasn't supposed to see. For instance, the world 17 years into the past. About the legend of Pygmalion, the Teeth Blau virus, the Cure virus, Pipi, and Chami. I knew about all of them now. I knew exactly what had happened during the dramatic escape 17 years ago and what had happened on May 6th and 7th, in the world in 2034. I could sense even the different history flows in this world. I knew about escaping using the principle of a siphon and about swimming to the ocean surface from 104 feet under the water. The third eye, Blick Winkel, those words were clear in my head, and then I remembered running into Miss Tanaka on the floating island. Or maybe more precisely, I should say, I could see it rather than remember it. Anyway, I saw her. The woman who was called Miss Tanaka, Yubisei Akikana's mother. Meaning, she was actually Yubisei Harukana. Although their relationship defied the norm, still Yubisei Harukana and Yubisei Akikana were mother and daughter. Pieces of my thoughts scattered. I tried gathering them and struggled to come up with some kind of conclusion. It's 2034 now, and Coco was in 2017. I whispered to confirm the facts. Yes, that's right. It was 2034 now. That was why Tsugumi had been so suspicious of us. Because the same thing that had happened 17 years ago was repeating. How about the others? Since Yubisei Akikana had been one 17 years ago, she couldn't possibly have known about the incident. And since Sarah hadn't been born yet, she wouldn't know either. Sora, being AI, couldn't lie, and she didn't seem to be lying either, so that only left Kaburaki. Did that mean Kaburaki was the mastermind behind this whole incident in 2034? No, wait. There had been two others who had survived the incident 17 years ago, Yubisei Harukana and Coco. On May 6, 2017, Kaburaki, Yubisei Harukana, and Coco, who had been infected with the Teeth Blah virus, had been rescued by the Miniso, which came to the pool in an IBF. Oh, wait. How did the three of them recover from the virus after they'd been infected? Because of the injection of antibodies made from Tsugumi's blood? But Coco hadn't received the antibodies. Because she had been under high-pressure oxygen treatment in the capsule pod at the time. Huh? No, even before that. Yubisei Harukana suffered from critical heart disease, right? But Yubisei Harukana is still alive and well now. What is going on here? Well, I guess there's just one answer. It's the only explanation. Yubisei Harukana and Kaburaki must have been infected with the cure virus. Their bodies must have repeated 5 years' worth of cell division, and when all their DNA had been replaced, they stopped aging. That must have been why they looked younger than their real age. And Yubisei Harukana's heart disease would have been fixed by the cure virus. But still, is that really what happened? In a different history flow, Kaburaki couldn't see the image in the pendant. If he wasn't lying or acting, he must not have possessed infrared vision. And although I didn't have proof, my instincts told me Yubisei Harukana didn't possess infrared vision either. Then again, in the world of 2017, Tsugumi had mentioned she was special among carriers of the cure virus. Perhaps she was a rare example of DNA replacement that had taken place safely over the whole body. That meant Yubisei Harukana and Kaburaki were not complete cure then, but it didn't seem to me that there could be any such thing as an incomplete cure. It's no use. I can't figure it out. But I still had far serious matters to deal with. I needed to think about this problem first. The problem was, how was I able to sense incidents that had taken place before I was born, or in separate continuums? And why is the same accident as 17 years earlier taking place again? It couldn't have been a coincidence. Obviously someone had planned it. There was only one clue. Coco. I wanted to see Coco. I felt that Coco would know everything there was to know about this incident, but how could I find Coco, who seemed to just pop up randomly? Oh, I know! I had a sudden inspiration. I had a hunch. At this hour on the 5th, Coco would show up in the Cosmic Whale Room. Yeah. You better not have asked me to come all this way just to tell me that stupid joke, and it's only 8 a.m. in the morning. To date?
のクジラさんのとこに。というのはグッドぴょーん。タケピョンにはもうお嫁さんがいるんだもんね。
Huh?
照れんな照れんな。ここタケピョンのことならなんでも知ってるんだから。タケピョンのことだけじゃなくて他のこともみんなわかるんだ。
Everything.
そうだよ。だってここ超能力者なんだもん。ここにはね、昔から別の世界の人とお話しできる力があるの。
Different worlds meaning the other side?
そういうんじゃなくて、こことは違う別の世界のこと。
Ah.
その別の世界にいる人の視点を借りれば過去も未来もいっぺんにわかるんだよ。
Oh, really? Wow.
例えば二次元平面に住んでる人たちにはその世界の全体像は見えないでしょ。ナスカの地上絵は地上にいても見えないよね。ディスプレイに描いたかっちょいいメカの絵もその絵の中の1ドットさんには理解できないわけだし。
Yeah.
それを見るにはどうすればいい？ナスカの地上絵だったら上空から見下ろせばいいし、かっちょいいメカの絵だったら画面から離れて3次元空間内から見ればいいよね。ココたちがいる世界は3次元空間でしょ。3次元空間が時間軸方向に移動してるんだ。で、その様子を見るには3次元空間内にいたんじゃ無理じゃない？ 4次元空間の中からココたちの世界を見下ろさなくちゃいけないの。
I'm gonna think of it. Didn't Sora mention something like
でも
this?
ココは人間だし、時間の流れから脱出することはできないし、だから4次元空間の世界に住んでる人から視点を借りるんだ。
So what you're trying to say is the people from the other side are really people from the fourth dimension? That's the dumbest thing I've ever...
できるんだもん。できちゃうんだもん。実際にできちゃうんだから。しょうがないでしょ。
Ah, it's the third eye.
そうとも言う。
So you can tell everything about my past then.
北端の場合はココのとは少し違うのかも。
Eh?
北端は本当の北端じゃないでしょ。北端は視点を借りてるんじゃないんだよ、きっと。北端の場合は視点そのものなんじゃないかな。
What do you mean?
ブリック・ウィンケルさん。
What?
ブリック・ウィンケルさんなら全部知ってると思うよ。
Blick Winkel. Just then, a massive boom rocked our eardrums. We all reflexively looked up. The ceiling of our world, the cosmos, had shattered. Immediately, a large amount of seawater rained down on us like an avalanche. Shards from the shattered wall cracked off and shot into the floor like bullets. I looked back, but Coco was gone. Coco! Nobody was there to respond. All the sound was drowned out from the water rushing in, so that we could hardly even hear our own voices. Droplets of water were falling from above. White mist was rising from below. The water level was rising quickly. An incoming jet of water from the ceiling struck the whale, which was suspended in the center of the room. It bent backward hard, fell, and lay on the floor. Its big mouth flapped open. Its pupils were empty. The whale was dead. I turned around, cutting through the water, and fled from the room. The door to the whale room closed with a gurgling sound.
お兄ちゃん、大丈夫？
I spun around, drawn by Sarah's voice. She was standing there, shoulders heaving.
警報が鳴ったから飛んできたんだけど。
Looking over Sarah's shoulder, I could see people running toward us from the corridor. I returned my gaze to the door. It didn't appear to be leaking. The well room was flooded, but it looked as though the other areas were safe, for now.
ねえ、お兄ちゃん。血
Eh?
血出てる。
Sarah pointed to my left hand. I looked at my palm. Where did I get this cut? Did a shard hit me when it fell and I just didn't notice? Or did I snag it on something when I was trying to get out of the door? At any rate, bright red blood was dripping from the side of my
平
hand.
気？
Sarah took a white handkerchief from her pocket and, taking my injured hand in hers, bound the wound.
痛い？
I shook my head. The truth was, I didn't feel anything more important than the scratch on my hand. Blick Winkel.
え？
Sarah tilted her head questioningly. More than the injury, more than the flooding, more than anything, Coco's words were running through my head.
ブリック・ウィンケルさん。
Blick Winkel. Blick Winkel. Who are you? Who am I? Again. I can't hear that voice again. Was it my voice or someone else's? I kept staring at the palm of my left hand. A red stain spread slowly across the white fabric. Who are you? Who am I?
ホクタンは本当のホクタンじゃないでしょ。ブリック・ウィンケルさんなら全部知ってると思うよ。
Blick Winkel. Blick Winkel. Blood. The wet crimson stain spread, and blood fell in thick droplets, landing in the puddles at my feet. It spread out in the water like smoke to eventually dissolve into the seawater. Just then, my vision grew red. I could see it. I could see everything. Everything in the year 2017. A continuous flow of fragmentary images. Pieces of this world flowed by without context. I was simply an onlooker of everything in this world. Yes, I couldn't take part. I could only watch. I was nothing more than a perception. Coco groaned and held her hand pressed against her mouth. Fresh crimson blood dribbled through the cracks of her fingers. A red stain spread on the floor of the control room.
なんてこと。これはこの症状は。症状？そんなのどうでもいい。見てわからないの？このままじゃココが。
ココ、しっかりするんだ。
クラナにどうしようどうしよう。
待て、取り乱すんじゃない。みんな落ち着け。
I was only a perspective and had no real sense of feeling. The link between my sight and consciousness had been broken, and all I could do was continually gaze at the scene unfolding before me. I felt neither sadness nor anger, neither impatience nor despair. I was looking at the reality in front of me as one might stare at a meaningless jumble of numbers. TF Blau 2017 Ever17, the LMRI was scanning Coco's condition, the TF Blau virus.
しっかりしてよ、ココ。嫌だ。死んじゃ嫌だ。
Coco's body lay on the examination table. Kabaraki held her thin arm intensely.
目を開けてくれ、ココ。頼むよ。起きてくれよ。
Kabaraki grabbed a hold of Coco's shoulders and was shaking her violently.
おい、よせ。やめろ、少年。
Oh. Takeshi pulled him back from Coco. Okay, that's what he looks like.
何すんだよ。バカ野郎、落ち着けよ。そんなことして何になるんだ。だってこのままじゃここが死んじゃうよ。慌てんな。何か手はあるはずだ。黙ってろ。落ち着け。考えろ。
Sora interrupted Takeshi and the kid with her hand. Looking at all the people gathered in the room, she announced,
EVF と呼ばれる施設がこの真下にあります。テーマパークレミューの運営母体、ライプリヒ製薬。そのライプリヒが設立した研究施設が EVF です。
EVF?
Takeshi mumbled to himself. It seemed as if it were familiar to him.
EVF にはこちらの救護室よりもはるかに充実した医療設備が整っているはずです。あくまでレミのデータベースからの推測ですが、EVF の診療室には最新型の高圧酸素治療装置があるようです。その治療装置を使えば白血球の殺菌作用が増大します。ココちゃんの症状をある程度緩和することができるかもしれません。
よし、わかった。EVF。とにかくそこに連れて行けばここは助かるんだな。
でも EVF に行くにはヒンメルを通らないと。ヒンメルの扉は開かないんですよ。
とにかく行くんだよ。それ以外に方法はないんだ。無駄かもしれないけど、いや、とにかく行ってみなきゃわからないだろう。そら、案内頼む。少年、ちょっと手伝ってくれ。はい。
Takeshi picked up Coco's inert body and carried her piggyback. They arrived at Himmel. The door was shut fast.
くそ、どうすりゃいいんだ。
Coco slid off Takeshi's back. She weakly hunched over on the floor. The color of her face had gone translucent like rose, parched and her eyes looked feverish. Just then,
Excellency, the tour from Himmel.
アナウンスなんだ。
誰かがレミシステムにアクセスしています。この部屋の中、ヒンメルの端末からです。
なんだって。
the access indicator light for the electronic lock began to blink and soon changed to green. Yep, the hatches liberated and turned automatically. The door opened. Okay, and I know all this.
おい、こいつ。おい。そもそも、そら。
いいえ、ですが。
なあ。
君はレミ
おい。
する
どうした。
だけどこん
おい。
こうなれば皆さん、あれは私いいそのそしてねんここティーフェティーフェあティーフェティーフェ
とにかくなあ、ユウつぐみ
調べる。
おい、おっさん。
無事この戻っ
あんた、いや、
さ合金エン
あ
そい
あ、しっかりし。
あとは
ああ、ここを
ええ、
マニュアルは
Okay.
オッケー。
よかった。ええ、
なんとか俺たちも。
Meanwhile, Takeshi and the others soon arrived at a small room covered in iron plating. There were a few computer terminals there with nobody stationed at them. Operating the terminals, they scanned through some of the information there. They were searching for any information that they could use, and finally came across something interesting. IBF Visitor Registry Coco Yakami. Coco's name was listed in the corner of a business log. Looking further into the file, there seemed to be a personal memo written by somebody. Author Takeshi Yakami. I get to see my daughter for the first time in a while. Her school is on vacation, so she has a 10-day break. I've been trapped for so long in this tin can doing virus research that I'm jealous. That aside, when I told her that special permission had been granted for her to come down and see IBF, she sent me a happy reply saying she would. We've exchanged mail every once in a while, but I wonder how long it's been since we've actually seen each other. I'll just be happy if she hasn't forgotten what I look like. Which meant that Coco had been to visit IBF once before May 1st to see her father. Postscript. It seems that T.Y.'s daughter is working part-time here at Lima. I'm still not sure if I should tell him or... After that point, all the data was corrupted, making it impossible to check what else had been... Found nothing.
You.
Yep. Skip.
そう
あ、
ティーフブラウン対症療法あとは
そう辛いな。
そうここが治私たそうここ
治らただここ
あの高圧使え
はいなんだ。
わからん結局今は
お
Okay, right then. Caught his throat. Ugh.
おっさん
Jeez.
おっさんここの
今の
そうかおっさん
Okay. Anything yet?
彼には
Nope.
ち
実研究員彼
そう
あのレミュー近年プログラマーにとレミューのシステム
だと
レミューのそうだ
何の
空は
え
浮島にレミュー
なんだ
ライプリー製薬はだからここだけあた気を私たち気を
空俺たちの空あれ
Me.
いやなんかちょっとどこからか誰かに
Oh. Whoa, what? Did they see him?
たけし
あ
あなた鼻血が
えだえまあ
かっこたけしたけ
しん
全しまみ心理つぐみ
Mm-hmm. I remember all this, yep.
まだ治療さ
どうだゆうへい
ま誰かでもロックなんの
たの
オッケーここの
証拠上
そう
なんだ
私がオレンジアンプル
つら
ええ大丈夫よ
そっか
ねえ私おかしく
うんお前免疫つまり例の
言う私は
Okay.
で
ある人
森の世界的に言う私のこのそのそう私はでもつぐみたけしにはもう口で説明するだからそうよまあ分かったと
すぐ
私のこの機械でスキャンをかけたらまだ世界でも
なるほどライプリヒ製薬はキュレーティーフブラウン
そういうだから来なくてもやつだけどようやくバカに
Okay. So she carries the cure virus, and
何もか
the machine was able
ある
to
ない
see that. So she didn't want to think that she was the only one with the cure virus.
俺たちは死なない必ず生きて
If the machine scanned her and found that she had the cure virus, then that means that there already were people with the virus that were there. So she wasn't even the first one that had the virus.
さい俺はもちろん天然頭そうお前その
そん朝部活
このそうだ俺だどうしなあ
聞いてくれないこの演習アレナティーフ
It's mostly the same.
つぐみ
I don't see anything new just yet.
そう一度どうな
キュレイお前頼むかけさって
もうみんなに
あ
もし
大丈夫俺
That's still the same.
応答してください。第3位こちらは
もっと
Rescue, yep.
あ
これ
あ
要救助
し
民間さ
ど
石炭研究所な
ま
レミもしもいずれにも必ず救
あおくそな電動いやこれあとつぐみねまこの俺
ティープ
そらよそんひすぐドア
電子クラ
時間ど
急
知るかそ
敵
はい
今
いい
ダメクラ
止めるなよ
わかりでは核兵器を小町
あ何をまあ
死ぬ
忘れ物を取りにあかけ俺の何
ど
泳ぎは潜水で20クイックだなあ
50
そうだこんなとこにだお前これだから向かい
たけし
Aw.
クラッチジャンプ
ま落ちこれ
ギリギリで最後のパスワードそして名前 TY 田中陽一ヒンメルにあったあの寺場ありがとう
あこっちそれじゃそらしばし
いいえさよなら
あ俺も
私かもうだ今
俺わかるそら
はい
あとボタン
大丈夫それありがとう
あ
どうした
時間
予定
実はゆ
あいない
本当ゆうも
どこへ
いや待て
こちら
こちら
よ先
すまないみんな
今ことは
わかった
まだ
俺をあと一人
了解しかし
探査
こちらもさ
了解
どういうこと
なんだ俺とつぐみを待っている間に救助の連
そ
さ次のもし
何
そこまあみんなよかったとにかく
Okay. I woke up. Okay. And this is him, right?
少年脱出口が見つかったの
is everyone
マユは
else?
クラナミが迎えに行ってる。つぐみはもう非常通路にいるわ。
She's going to get Maya. Okay. Kawaraki, Suguma,
急げ、時間がないぞ。
Sarah.
いいか
Okay.
いい？よく聞いて。やっと地上と連絡。でも、だから。
Right. And now he's escaping.
急げ。もう
Okay. So he doesn't know the reasons behind any of this. Dawn. I was in the middle of white darkness. Before I knew it, I had become lost in another world. I didn't even have time to wonder where I was before I found the answer. The year was 2017. I could see it. I could see everything. I already knew what had happened at that time.
たけし、タクシー。
Yes.
チャミ、ほら。あれ？
I know what happened. Okay.
あれ
ピッ。
おい
そうい、ずいぶん。
12 minuten for the
こまもう
とにかく砂。
このじょ
でも
当たり前
few minutes.
お無事に
とタクシーか。
5 minuten for the
いやまあ
Yep, I know what happened.
くだ
うん、私
どうぞ
今の
さ
音何
あおい
の
そっちの
見たいや
電源だとさはいそんなないこなあ
無理よ。まっすぐそんな余分そも
ふバラ
ほんだけ
まこ全体そこいらん
簡単。
いや
やっぱり
無
抜けな
何はな
や
ほなある
たけ
すぐガラス
何か
知ってたんでさそう
まさ
俺そう大丈夫だって大丈夫俺
Yeah, there's no way he survived that. He's way too deep underwater. Dad, back in the world of 2034, when I returned to consciousness, I was crying. Feelings overcame me and torrents rushing through me haughtily. Oh, what the? Okay. Dad is dead. The weight of my sadness pushed down on me, and a sense of futility tore a hole in my heart. But it was no time to be overcome by sadness. Wiping the wetness from my cheeks, I looked at my surroundings. A new day was breaking, just as it had been in 2017. And through my tears, the blue sky and ocean came into my vision. It seemed that I was above the floating island. I could analyze the situation calmly, but the tears wouldn't stop. I wiped them away with the palm of my hand and let the large drops as they rolled past my mouth. Squeezing my eyes shut tightly, I took in deep breaths to calm down. I trembled slightly as I let out a sigh and looked around at my surroundings again. It was definitely above the floating island. The wind was blowing lightly, and the green trees were swaying gently. The morning sun was letting out golden rays onto the surface of the ocean. It had been a while since I had been outdoors. The wide blue sky, the smell of the warm, humid breeze. But as beautiful as it seemed, it didn't help me one bit. Rather, the richness of it all made me feel even more alienated. I'm all alone, and so terribly sad. I wiped away the tears, which continued to flow, and tried hard to suppress my urge to cry out. I had to think. It was no time to be crying. I shook my head repeatedly and tried with all of my strength to collect my atrophied thoughts. Think. First, I needed to grasp the situation I was in. I followed the threads of my memory. I remembered having gotten safely out of Limu, but had no memories after that. I had no idea of what had happened after that. I couldn't imagine that I had been standing outside all night. Huh? I suddenly realized that nobody else was there. As I began to walk on grass, I looked wildly in all directions. Soon, I became aware of one solitary figure. It was Kaburaki. He had his back to a tree trunk and was staring out at the vast ocean. I ran over to him and screamed at him. Why would you do something like this? Answer me. I know everything now. Kaburaki was silent. He wouldn't even look at me. It was obvious that he was the closest person to being responsible for everything happening here. Takeshi Kurinari, my father's name. He had used this name to deceive us the whole time. I drew even closer. Say something. Don't just stand there. I said say something. I grabbed onto his shirt.
悪いが、俺の口からは何も言えないんだ。
Kaburaki's eyes were wet. He seemed to be thinking deeply about something as he gazed at me.
だが、一つだけ教えてやろう。これで終わったと思うなよ。すべてはこれから。そう。これから始まるんだからな。
I relaxed my grip. Kaburaki didn't say anything more and walked away, gazing in the direction of the distant horizon. I stood there vacantly staring at his back while it became smaller and smaller. Somebody tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and Sora was standing right in front of me.
お待ちしておりました。
What are you doing here? Only this thought didn't reach my lips. The crew was no RSD on this floating island, but she had just tapped me on the shoulder. I couldn't process the information, stood there gaping in confusion. I reached out to touch Sora's arm absent-mindedly. Her skin was smooth, its texture slightly elastic, and warm to the touch.
どうぞこちらへ。
Sora grinned. There was Sora smiling as always. I felt saved by her smile. I was led by Sora into the forest. A small stone-covered path was overgrown in a deep thicket. The tips of the trees stretched up high, almost entangling one another. Hardly any light squeezed through. There was no breeze here either. The air was wet and everything felt heavy and stagnant. The small stone path snaked around randomly, and I soon lost all sense of direction as I continued walking. I moved forward along that passage with no exit. For some reason, I did not say a word to Sora, whose back was in front of me. I walked up beside her and interlaced my fingers in hers. I didn't know why I said that. Was I just curious, or had I wanted a sense of security? Sora looked over at me and smiled. Maybe the reason I grabbed onto her was just because I wanted to see her smile at me. Not long afterward, we finally emerged from the forest. My field of view widened, and beyond spread out an area of lush green grass and the rich blue ocean. My line of sight was drawn to the back of someone very familiar to me. He was standing right in the center of the open space, and she was standing with her back to me and someone else, a woman who looked just like her. They were facing each other and standing still. I braced against the rising tide of emotion within me and went to stand over by them. I flashed a look back. Sora was standing at the entrance to the forest and didn't appear to be coming closer. In the center of that area were you, the lady, and I, the other lady. Of course I knew her name. Tanaka Yibise Harukana. She had been infected with the cure virus, and although she seemed young, she didn't look quite 17. It was probably since her cells had divided for 5 years, which had caused her to age slightly. In other words, her body was that of a 23-year-old, but she was actually 35. I looked over at Yubise Akikana, standing next to me. She had her hand curled into a fist and was glaring at her mother. She was so mad she was shaking. I realized. that the person who had been manipulating everything behind the scenes had been the person standing in front of me. Yubisei Harukana, Yu's mother. She'd been up here safe and sound on the island, relaxing, looking down at her plate, and had probably been laughing the whole time. I glared over at her along with Yuaki. Yu Haru appeared indifferent to our stares and said nonchalantly. I laughed without thinking. What the heck kind of thing was that to say? Why? Why would you do something like this? What the heck is Blick Winkel? Me? I'm Blick Winkel?
北斗のことじゃないの。北斗の向こう側にいる視点に向かって言ってるのよ。
Perspective?
ええ、第三視点。ブリック・ビンケル。北斗の向こう側にいるあなた。そう、今私のことを見ているあなた。あなた自身のこと。最初から少年とはあなた自身のことだったの。あなたが北斗の視点と重なった時、北斗は記憶を失いあなたになった。だから北斗が記憶喪失になったのは当然のことなの。あなたにはこの世界で過ごした経験がない。あなたにはこの世界の中での歴史がない。記憶がない。あなたは2034年5月1日15時17分初めてこの世界に産声を上げた少年。あなたは私たちの世界の住人ではない。もう一次元高い世界から私たちの世界を見下ろしている。だからあなたには過去や未来のことがわかる。それだけじゃない。異なった別の歴史の流れさえあなたには手に取るようにわかるはず。少年に予知のようなことができたのはあなたがこの世界の全てを知っていたから。北斗という名前を自分の名前だと思えなかったのも当然のこと。だってあなたの本当の名前は北斗ではないでしょ。怖がらなくてもいいの。自分に嘘をつく必要はないのよ。さあ、本当のあなたを見せて。答えて。正直に。あなたは北斗という名前の少年ではないんでしょ。
Who am I? Who are you? I am Hokuto. Who are you? Who am I? You are Hokuto. I'm not Hokuto. I'm not Hokuto. I am me. I am me. Yes, I remember. I am me. I have watched your world for so long. Watching. I am but a perspective, an eye that transcends dimensional boundaries. I am the third eye. I am. Blick Winkel. I remember now. I am not from your world, am I? I am not Hokuto.
久しぶりね。
A long time.
いえ、なんでもないわ。気にしないで。ありがとう。姿を見せてくれて。
Okay, and I think the Sora there, that was the real Sora, the girl that the Sora AI is based on. Why? Please tell me why. Why did you have to do this?
それはもう教えたでしょ。あなたを発言させるためよ。召喚
って言ってもいいけど。
In order to reach me, did you really have to do something so reckless and dangerous?
さっきも説明した
Or maybe not, because this is 2034.
もう一次元高い世界から私たちの世界を見下ろしている。
Maybe they just created a model for her, because that model existed in 2017 and 2034. Okay, maybe it's not based off a real girl at all.
二次元世界に視線を持った存在がいたとしましょう。その二次元存在が三次元存在とコンタクトを取るにはどうすればいいと思う？例えば XY 平面上に二次元的な存在の点 ABC があり XYZ 空間の中に三次元的な存在の点 D があったとする。点 ABC は XY 平面の上しか移動することはできない。では点 D を取り込むためにはどうすればいいか。点 AB を通る直線上に点 C を移動すればいいの。すると点 ABC は同一直線上に並ぶから、この直線と点 D を通る平面が生まれることになる。つまり点 D はこの時点 ABC と同じ平面内に存在することになるの。ここで点 D はあたかも自分自身が点 ABC と同じ世界にいるかのような錯覚を覚える。私たちがやったのはこれと同じこと。2034年の世界を2017年であるかのごとく見せかけることによって点 D、 すなわち4次元内の視点ブリック・ウィンケルに私たちのいる空間と同一空間にいるかのごとく錯覚を起こさせたってわけ。そしてついにあなたは私たちのいる空間内に降臨した。姿を見せた。待ってたのよ私たち。あなたが来るのずっと待ってたの。
Why? Why were you waiting for me? What reason could you have to call for me?
すべてあなたの指示に従っただけよ。
Huh?
あなたを呼んだのはあなた自身なの。
What do you mean?
あなたも私たちもあなたを必要としていたの。
Why?
ココとクラナリを助けるためにはどうしてもあなたの力が必要だったのよ。
To save Coco and Takeshi?
私たちは時間の流れに対して無力なの。過ぎてしまったことはどうすることもできないの。けれどあなたにならそれができる。なぜなら4次元存在であるあなたは時間を自由に移動することができるのだから。
I saw it then. I saw it, everything. My consciousness had detached from Hokuto and gone back to the world of 2017. Hokuto's feelings and thoughts hadn't reached me, but our perspectives had overlapped. An observer with no feelings. All I could do was witness events as they passed. Okay. And now the submarine made it to the surface.
どうしたの？外に出たいの？うん。
Right. So PP's a robot. Okay. And he swam down to the floor of the ocean and saved Takeshi.
死 おうちパパもママも待ってる。だから早くおうち帰ろうね。ピピ。
Okay. Girl was Coco.
ティーフ・ブラウンに感染した私と鏑木はやってきた潜水艇に救助された。でもその潜水艇にココは乗ってなかったの。その時私は意識を失ってたから気づかなかったけど、でも後になってから分かったの。ココは EBF に置き去りにされてしまったんだ。
I can't believe it.
こちらインゼルヌル管制応答願います。
こちら第3 EBF 診療室どうぞ。
よかった、そこにいてくれたか。先ほど派遣した特急隊から到着連絡が入った時に君を発見できなかったようなので心配していた。
すまない、少し留守にしてたんだ。
診療室に残っていた要救助者3名はすでに回収した。現在民間サルベージの潜水艇に応急処置中だ。
みんなは無事なのか。
今の段階では何とも言えない。重傷だ。ことは1分1秒を争う。潜水艇は一時緊急浮上して彼らを海上の病院へと搬送する。
分かった、頼んだぞ。
The control center said they had rescued the other 3 people in the examination room. So why?
その要救助者3名の内訳は私と鏑木とそれから私の父田中陽一のことだったの。
Why? Why did the rescue team leave Coco there?
後から聞いた話だとそのような女の子は見かけなかったって。
Oh, I remember. By the time the rescue squad got there, Coco wasn't in the examination room. I don't know why, but for some reason Coco had gotten out of her capsule pod, so the only people left there were you, Kaburaki, and Mr. Tanaka, who is already dead.
そうみたいね。
You and Kaburaki's condition was extremely serious, so they put the highest priority on saving the lives of those two, and the rescue squad left, meaning they overlooked Coco. No, they abandoned her. You pinched her eyes shut, her face distorted in sadness. What do you want me to do? By the time these words left my mouth, I had already returned to 2017, to that vast blue world. On the bottom of the ocean lay the cruelly broken body of a man. It didn't move. What do you want me to do? I'm not from this world. The only thing that I can do is look. Just look on. You wanted to show me this dead body? It makes me sad. Terribly sad. He had thrown his life away to protect the woman he loved. It was heartbreaking. His body had lost all warmth. I kept staring. Just then, Dad! 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 My awareness split, broke, fractured as a powerful force of will broke up inside me. I was infused with an overwhelming passion. Hokuto's indomitable belief, willpower, emotions, and psyche were like a raging inferno that engulfed me. His ferocious and wild power raged within me and superseded my existence. It exploded in a shower of white sparks of light and roared like thunder. Overwhelmed by the raw vigor, I withdrew. It was no place for me to be. Hokuto exploded with bottled up emotions and threw his instinctive power free into darkness.
お父さん、お父さん、死んじゃやだよ。死なないで。僕はまだ一度もお父さんに会ったことがないのに、僕を置いていかないで。お父さん、サラも僕も待ってるんだよ。お母さんだって待ってる。 お母さんを悲しませないで僕らを助けてよ。約束したじゃないか。絶対死なないって言ったじゃないか。一人も死なせはしないって誓ったんでしょ。ココはまだ研究所にいるんだよ。このままじゃココが死んじゃうんだよ。お父さん、お父さん。
Takeshi opened his eyes. At the bottom of the seabed, under unbearable pressure, he regained consciousness. How many minutes had it been since he last breathed? But he was undeniably alive. He had revived. I'm not going to die. I promised her. I could hear the screams of his mind in my ears. Takeshi flipped over his body, kicking off the reef, and began to swim. He cut the water with his arms and kicked with his legs, continuing to swim wildly through the water. The water pressure did not faze him, and his body felt no resistance. He moved forward in the darkness as if he were skating on ice. Bubbles trailed in an arc behind him. He maintained an unthinkable speed, tearing apart the wall of water in front of him. His only source of guidance was a faint light visible ahead. His momentum carried him flying out of the water. Takeshi pushed his face out of the water, racked by a fit of violent cough, and spewed out seawater from his lungs. He clung to the edge of the pool, sucking in deep breaths of air. He would partly take in a breath, only to throw up massive amounts of water. He repeated this many times. When the painful fits had finally died down, Takeshi lay exhausted like the dead. Truth be told, he probably had been dead. Takeshi crawled across the floor. He flipped over on his back with a thud. He couldn't move. The sound of his heavy breathing echoed off of the walls. Hokuto called out. Takeshi laughed.
どこの誰だか知らんけど、俺をお父さんなんて呼ぶんじゃない。お父さんだから俺には子供なんかいないんだ。でも僕はお父さんの子供なんだよ。じゃあ母親は誰なんだ。つぐみだよ。笑われてもしょうがないと思う。多分信じてもらえないよね。僕は今17年後の未来から話しかけてるんだ。17年後、2034年か。ところでお前どこにいるんだ。姿が見えないけど。お父さんのすぐ近くにいるよ。
Takeshi peeled himself off the floor where he'd been lying and moved slowly. He looked all around. He survived!
お父さんには僕のことは見えないと思う。僕は見てるだけだから、お父さんのことを。意味がわからないんだが。お父さんの世界に肉体があるわけじゃないんだよ。だからもちろん声帯を使って言葉を発してるわけでもない。僕はお父さんの心の中に直接語りかけてるんだ。
Takeshi put his finger in his ear and wiggled it.
幻聴ってやつか。俺もとうとう。違うってば。とにかく時間がないんだ。今はのんびりと話してる場合じゃないんだよ。ああ、そういえばさっきココが研究所にいるとかなんとかって言ってたな。うん、そうなんだ。ココは潜水艇で脱出したわけじゃなかったんだ。管制官の言った要救助者っていうのはユウとカブラクと、それからあの研究員のことだったんだよ。嘘だろ。とにかく研究所の中をもう一度調べてみて。そこにココがいるはずなんだ。
Takeshi hurried down the corridor. The research facility was almost entirely silent. The only sound was the echo of Takeshi's shoes against the floor. The corridor wound left and right. He searched around but didn't find any signs of anyone.
やっぱり誰もいないじゃないか。そんなはずないよ。絶対研究所の中にいるんだ。
Takeshi tilted his head a bit quizzically.
まあ、お前には礼を言っておこう。お前がお父さんなんて狂言じみたことを言って俺を起こさなかったら、きっと俺はあのまま海のモップスと化してただろうからな。体の方は大丈夫？ 大丈夫なわけないだろう。この数時間以内に俺の身に降りかかった数々の出来事を考えてみろ。チーフ・ブラウンの発病から始まって、急激な減圧、加圧、つぐみから採取した抗体を打って、最後は海の底に放り出されて窒息。放り出されてというか、自分で飛び込んだわけではあるが、その割には元気そうに見えるけど。うん、確かに。つぐみから採取した抗体が効いてきたのかな。
Or maybe effects of the cure virus have already started. There's no way his DNA could be rewritten so quickly. But that might be another explanation for why Takeshi recovered so quickly from jumping in the water. I have no way of knowing. It doesn't matter though, he looks a lot better after walking around for a while. He looks strong even. Takeshi walked down the passageway on steady legs. He came to an intersection. Checking quickly to the left and right, he set down the path to the left. It was right after that. Without waiting for Hokuto's reply, Takeshi started running. Coco had fallen down in the corridor. Takeshi rushed over to Coco and lifted up her motionless body. Coco spoke faintly. It appeared that Coco had gotten out of the pool all by herself before the rescue squad had arrived and had gone off looking for Pee-Pee. Takeshi shook his head, dumbfounded. Coco looked innocently at the exasperated Takeshi and said the following words. That was all Coco could say before she passed out. The next instant, a loud explosion shook the walls of IBF. The sound came from up above. The falling wreckage from Lima had probably collided with the roof of the research facility. Paradise was still collapsing, it seemed. Takeshi quickly scooped up Coco's body and dashed across the floor. Kicking up his feet, Takeshi screamed to the void. Hokuto answered.
ここは水深119メートルだぞ。息が続かない。ここも俺も。大地浮上するにはな、減圧しながらゆっくりとゆっくりと登っていかなきゃならないんだ。ここは 12.5 気圧。海上は1気圧だ。減圧しなかったらまず間違いなく生きて帰ることはできない。エレベーターは分断されてる。エレベーターチューブはとっくの昔に倒壊して今もうない。上へ登るルートはないんだ。ひとまず診療室へ。分かってるよ、そんなことは。
Takeshi ran into the examination room. He hit the control panel and closed the door. Strangely, there was no sign of flooding inside IBF. There was no sound of running water, and the tremors had stopped for the time being. But there was still no time to relax. Coco's body was fast reaching its limit. Takeshi laid Coco down on the bed. He ran towards the side of the desk at the corner of the room. He then opened one of the storage bins and grabbed something. It was the antibodies for Teeth Blau taken from Sugumi. Coco hadn't been inoculated with it yet. Without a word, Takeshi gave Coco the antibodies. Coco had long passed the stage of suffering and lay there looking up. Takeshi threw the empty syringe away and held it onto Coco's hand as she lay there. A while had passed, but Coco's condition didn't seem to be improving. As a matter of fact, it seemed to be getting worse. Takeshi banged the wall.
だからその分病気が進行しちゃってるんだと思う。このままじっとしてても始まらないな。とにかく脱出方法だ。脱出方法。何か手を考えなければ。
Takeshi paced around the room with his head down. Occasionally heavy noises echoed from the ceiling. Takeshi listened to the noises. And then Takeshi, looking as if he had just realized something, whispered to himself.
さっき俺とつぐみが脱出する前、アナウンスがあった。悪界何分前とかいうドイツ語のアナウンスかな。なのにどうしてなんだ。なんで未だにこの研究所は無事なんだ。そんなこと僕に聞かれてもわからないけど、でももしかしたらなんだ。そのアナウンスはレミューの悪界を告げるためのものだったんじゃないかな。だって考えてみてよ。この研究所は内部の気圧と外の水圧が同じになるように保たれてるんだよ。力が釣り合ってるんだから、そう簡単に潰れることはないんだと思う。
That must have been it. If you leave the cap on an empty plastic bottle, even if you come back years later, the air will still be trapped inside, which meant that the laboratory should be safe, unless extreme force was added from somewhere. Since there's a giant piece of partition from wind falling on it. Although he didn't seem to be fully convinced, Takeshi nodded upon hearing Hokuto's explanation. By accepting the explanation, he was probably trying to clear one of the many problems facing him at the moment. As time progressed, Coco's condition got worse and worse.
なんでこんなことに。なんでなんだよ。
Takeshi kicked the wall.
お父さんがもっと早く抗体を打ってあげてれば。ああ、んなこと言ったってしょうがないだろ。あの時ココはポッドの中で加圧状態にあったんだ。蓋を開けるわけにはいかなかったんだよ。でも蓋を開けなくても注射ぐらいできたはずだよ。だってユウが言ってたじゃないか。
高圧酸素治療の他にもレーザーでの現金やら簡単な手術のできる機能も備わってるらしいし、使い方によってはハイバネーションすら可能のようだけど。
それだけの機能があるんだったらきっと注射だって。でもユウは蓋を閉めたまま注射ができるなんて一言も言ってなかったぞ。あいつが言わなかったってことはそれが不可能だからだろ。もちろん俺や少年は装置のことなんて全くわからないしな。だいたいハイバネーションって何なんだよ。冬眠のことだよ。
Hokuto answered as if anyone would know.
冬眠ってクマとかカエルとかがするやつか。うん。ハイバネーション機能があるってことは、つまり人工冬眠ができるってことだと思う。人間の体を6度から7度ぐらいの低体温状態に保って、心拍数と呼吸数をギリギリまで減らす。そうすることによって代謝効率を下げてエネルギーを極力消費しないようにするんだ。だけどなんでそんなもんがここに。
In the middle of saying this, Takeshi stopped suddenly. At the same time, Hokuto's thoughts stopped too. And then they screamed out at the same time.
そうだ、冬眠させちまえばいいんだ。そうだ、冬眠させればいいんだよ。低体温状態に保てるってことは、ウイルスが体を蝕んでいく速度も遅くできるってことだよな。うん。よし、今はとにかく時間だ。時間さえあればきっとなんとかなる。1分でも1秒でもいいからウイルスの進行速度を遅くできればそれに越したことはないし、そうと決まれば早速。
Takeshi carried the frail Coco and set her into the pod. Then he started flipping through the manual at full speed, skimming it. It didn't seem too difficult to set up. Takeshi, unlike his usual self, manipulated the computer terminal swiftly and smoothly. Then, all that was left was to turn on the switch. Coco was asleep in the pod. Takeshi reached out his hand to the switch that would close the lid. A split second before he flipped the switch, Coco quietly opened her eyes.
誰？タケピョンの後ろに立ってるのは誰？
俺の後ろ？
Takeshi looked back. Hokuto was there.
ここには奴のことが見えるのか？
見える。
ココ、僕だよ。北斗だよ。
北斗？北斗って言うんだ。 じゃあホクタンって呼んでもいい？
The Coco at this time didn't seem to know Hokuto yet, so who was the phantom girl that I had been seeing?
北斗、それがお前の名前なのか？うん、そうか。ココ、俺には見えないが、その北斗ってやつが俺たちのことを助けてくれたんだぞ。
ホクタン、ありがとう。それからもう一人の君もありがとう。
もう一人誰かいるのか？
いる。北端の向こうに見える。
Silence filled the room. The room temperature felt suddenly lower for some reason. Coco was looking at me. Just me. Into my eyes. Are you talking about me? Feeling flustered, I gathered up my courage and spoke up.
そう。君のこと、やっと会えたね。
Huh?
ココ、北端のことは知らないけど、君のことは知ってるんだよ。だってずっとココのこと見守ってくれてたでしょ。四次元人間さん、ブリック・ウィンケルさん、またひよこごっこやろうね。ピヨピヨってピヨピヨって。
ココ、それは俺と。
Coco's cheeks eased up a little.
タケピョンにはわからないと思うけど、ココはタケピョンだけじゃなくてこの人とも遊んだのね。そうだよね。
Coco was asking me. I might have been watching over Coco for all this time. I've been watching over you. I wanted to get closer to you too, but it was probably not possible.
ほいじゃあさ、ココに告白したのも君だったのかな。
Yes, I suppose it was. Coco and I looked at each other. We were staring at each other. Our eyes filled with passion. I felt as though my existence would evaporate any
コ
second.
コ、これからどうなっちゃうの？
All of a sudden, a dark shadow had covered Coco's
コ
eyes.
コ、死んじゃうの？
Don't be silly. There's no way you're going to die. No matter what, I'll save your life, Coco. I won't let you die. Excitedly, I appealed to her. Although she looked to be in some pain, Coco smiled at me happily. My heart seemed that it would surely melt.
ココ、そういうわけだ。俺たちが必ずお前を救ってみせる。だから今は安心してゆっくり休むんだ。
As he was saying this, Takeshi went to close the pod.
どうするの？
少しの間だけ眠るんだよ。クマさんみたいにな。
いや、お願い。ココを置いてかないで。どこにも行かないで。一人ぼっちにしないで。
一人ぼっちなんかするわけないだろ。俺たちがずっとそばにいてやる。
嘘だもん。ココ、そんなの信じない。
わがまま言うな。このままじゃ本当にお前は。嫌なの。一人ぼっち寂しいから嫌なの。怖いの。
じゃあタキピョン一緒に添い寝してくれる？
無理言うな。このポットはな。
Takeshi stopped in the middle of what he was saying. He looked up at the ceiling, then to the monitor on the wall, and finally to the pot next to Coco.
よし、じゃあこうしよう。ココの隣のポットに俺が寝る。どうだ？それなら寂しくないだろ。
Coco looked back and forth between Takeshi and me. She had a worried look on her face and stared at us with eyes that seemed about to burst into tears.
本当に嘘つかない？
あ
絶対だよ。ココを置いて行っちゃやだよ。
あ、行かないよ。行くわけないだろ。
わかった。ココ、タケピョンのこと信じる。
よし、いい子だ。
Takeshi petted Coco's head.
じゃあ閉めるぞ、ココ。
Takeshi turned on the switch. The lid of the pot slowly went down.
ねえ、お休みする前に一つだけ願い事聞いてくれる？
願い事？
タケピョンに言ったんじゃないよ。
Coco's eyes were pointing towards me. Me?
あのね、ココね、ココね、君に会いたい。
What?
君にもう一度会いたい。会ってもっといっぱいお話ししたいの。
Uh-huh.
もしかしたらココ、君のことダメだ、やっぱり言えないかも。でも約束して、もう一度いつか会えるよね。
Yes.
ココ、待ってるから。ずっと待ってるから。必ず迎えに来てね。約束だよ。
Yes, I promise. The space between the lid and the pot itself was almost gone. I could barely see Coco through the narrow slit. Coco faced towards me and whispered one last thing in her tiny
それじゃ
voice.
あ、おやすみ、お兄ちゃん。
Brother! Before I could say anything in reply, the lid had closed. The sound of compressing air filled the room. The low whir of the motor. With a light metallic ring, the pot shut completely. Takeshi pushed another switch attached to the pot's chassis. The cryogenic suppression function was activated. There were small sounds as though gas were leaking out. The pot slowly cooled down, humming with a slight vibration.
さてと。おーい、なんとかビンケル、いるか？何？お父さん。なんだ、北斗か。ったく、紛らわしい奴らだな。お前はなんとかビンケルとは別人なんだろ？それとも北斗も4次元の存在なのか？うん、僕はただ視点を借りてるだけなんだ、今は。っていうか、全然わけがわからんのだけど、まあいいや。
Saying this, Takeshi sank his body into an empty pod, the pod next to Coco's.
え？お父さん、どうするつもりなの？どうするもこうするも仕方ないだろ？約束しちまったからな。じゃあ、お父さんも？うん、そういうことだ。どっちみち脱出する方法はなさそうだしな。救助隊の第二陣が来るのを待つしかないわけであり。だが、ただ待っていても無駄に体力を消費するだけだから、俺は寝ることにする。お父さん、ちょっと待ってよ。またん、俺はもう疲れたんだよ。本当に疲れたんだ。
Takeshi stretched his arm from where he lay and flicked the switch for both closing the lid and starting the cryogenic suspension at the same time. The lid started to close. Quietly. Steadily.
じゃあな、北斗。あとはよろしく頼むぞ。お父さん。あ、一つ言い忘れたことがあった。そのお父さんって呼び方、いい加減やめてもらえないかな。だってしょうがないじゃないか。僕はお父さんの子供なんだから。違う違う、そういう意味で言ったんじゃないんだ。どうせお父さんって呼ぶんならもっと上品にエレガントにだな。パパとパパとそう呼びなさい。わかったね。
Hokuto took a deep breath, trying to say something, but before he could say it, the lid of the pod had shut. A familiar hissing sound echoed in the room. The cryogenic suspension had activated. The pod cooled down with small vibrations. Just in case, Hokuto and I checked the monitor. The cryogenic suspension in the two pods was functioning properly. There were no signs of abnormality in the bioskins of Coco and Takeshi. The world in 2017, a laboratory at the bottom of the ocean. All that remained there was a perspective. Hokuto and I started to think. Oh yeah, we gotta let everyone know Coco and Takeshi are here in IBF. I'm not sure whether it was I or Hokuto who thought this. Maybe it was because we had switched places so often that the boundary between Hokuto and myself had started to become very vague. Our consciousness had gotten muddy, tangled, and intertwined. We were close to a state of fusion. Or maybe we might have been that way ever since the beginning. My thoughts were the same as Hokuto's, and Hokuto's thoughts were the same as mine. Being me and being Hokuto wasn't all that different. We had been one since long ago, and would continue to be one. That thought just went through my mind. But it wasn't the time to be engrossed in such thoughts. Our consciousness flew up to the floating island. A miniature submarine was floating on the ocean surface, swaying in the waves and being teased along by time. It left a carefree trail in the deep blue ocean. I searched inside of it, but Tsugumi had already disappeared. She must be somewhere on the floating island. I expanded my sight and looked down at the entire artificial island. I saw someone. But it wasn't Tsugumi. It was Yubise Harukana. Hokuto and I flew down near her side. Walking along with Yubise Harukana was Pee-Pee. He was soaking wet. Which meant that it must have been right after you had picked up Pee-Pee from the ocean surface. She was walking down the trail attended by a few men who seemed to be staff members of Limu. She was walking towards a helicopter. She was probably on her way to a large hospital or something. She looked surprisingly healthy. She was walking steadily without support. Although she seemed in a dark mood, at least her health seemed fine. The antibodies must have worked, just like with Takeshi. Anyway, I needed to tell her what had happened to Takeshi and Coco.
You.
It was Hokuto who shouted at her. Caught off guard, she glanced all around. The staff members darted skeptical looks at her when she started talking to herself all of a sudden. There was no way she could have known Hokuto. Hokuto hadn't even been born in this world. And she wouldn't have believed us if we had told her we're talking to you from 17 years in the future. Hokuto told her. Hokuto told her that Coco and Takeshi had been left in the laboratory and that they were under cryogenic suspension in the pods.
だから早く2人を助けてあげて。
本当なの？
本当だよ。ユウを救出した潜水艇にはココもタケシも乗ってなかったんだ。助かったのはあとつぐみとカブラキだけで。
Pee-Pee looked at Hokuto and me and gave a loud bark.
あ、そうだ。ピピ。今ユウの足元にいるピピ。ディスクを加えてたでしょ。
テラバイトディスクのことね。
そう、そこに空のデータが記憶が入ってるから。それから
ちょっと待ってよ。あなた一体どこにいるの？
そんなことどうでもいいんだよ。とにかく僕の言ってることを信じて。
信じられるわけないでしょ。何なのよこれ。
違うってば。本当にたけしとココは。
Phoebe started barking again.
あ、そうだよ。ピピが目撃してるはずだ。通路に倒れてたココの姿をピピの目がしっかりと捉えてる。多分ピピの中にその時の画像データが保存されてると思う。それを再生してみて。
She dropped her head down as if deep in thought, closed her eyes, and massaged her temples with her fingertips. After seeming distressed in this manner for a while, she must have reached a conclusion. You looked up in different direction and spoke.
あなたが誰だか知らないけど、とにかく調べてみるよ。
ありがとう、ユウ。それじゃあ頼んだよ。もう僕、元の世界に戻らなきゃいけないから。
元の世界って？
きっと信じてもらえないと思うけど、今から17年後の世界で。
Hokuto and I went back to the world of 2034. Surprisingly, the future had been completely altered. Takeshi was there, so was Coco. Yubisei Harakana was here, as was Yubisei Akikana. Tsugumi was there along with Sarah. Sora was there, Kaburaki was there, and so was Hokuto. They were chatting happily in a circle. I didn't know what had happened, but I was just relieved. The future had been altered. But how did it happen? I suppose Yubisei Harakana had kept her promise with Hokuto, so Coco and Takeshi were rescued immediately afterwards. In this version of history, Takeshi hadn't died 17 years ago, but was still alive and well. So in this world, Tsugumi didn't have to send Hokuto and Sarah to the institution. In this version of the future, Hokuto and Sarah didn't have to be separated. Besides, I understood that the incident in 2034 was planned so that I, Blick Winkel, would come into existence. It was planned to have me descend in this world so that the past would be altered and that Coco and Takeshi would be saved. But in this history, Coco and Takeshi had already been rescued safely 17 years ago. Therefore, there was no longer any way to grab my attention and make me appear in this world. So, Yubisei Harakana didn't have to come up with an outrageous plan to trap everyone at Limu, which meant that the incident starting on May 1st, 2034 hadn't taken place in this history. None of them had been trapped in Limu, which meant that Yubisei Harakana had no reason to lie to Yubisei Akikana. Yubisei Harakana must have told Yubisei Akikana the truth in this history. So they were all able to spend their lives peacefully from 2017 until now. They all had lived safely with time just passing by peacefully and slowly. And that was what I was seeing right then. Hey, but wait a second. I needed to think a little more about this. In 2017, Takeshi and Coco were saved by Yubisei Harakana's action, so if the time passed by peacefully, eventually it would be the year 2034. There wouldn't be any accident. I, Blick Winkel, wouldn't appear. What would happen then? Hokuto in this world wouldn't talk to Takeshi in the past, which is 2017, in the past that I know. Hokuto had funneled his raw, untamed force and had shouted to Takeshi's body lying on the bottom of the ocean. Dad, don't you die on me. But in the past, retraced from his future, Takeshi had never heard his son scream. That meant Takeshi would have long decomposed on the bottom of the ocean. Since Takeshi hadn't come back to life, Coco would have been left in the hallway, and both of them would die. Because the incident in 2017 had already taken place as a historical fact, which meant that even in the past connected directly to this world, the incident in 2017 wouldn't have been avoided. Therefore, this world could never be possible. It could never exist. It was a paradox. If this world could exist, this question would naturally arise. Who had saved Takeshi, who is alive here today? Was it Hokuto from a different future? Was it that Hokuto from a world where there had been an accident in 2034 who had saved Takeshi? No, that was not possible. Because in order for the incident to take place in 2034, the condition must be that Takeshi could not be saved in 2017, which meant In order for Takeshi to come back to life at the bottom of the ocean, the events had to take place in 2034. In order for Coco to go under cryogenic suspension, the events had to take place in 2034. Therefore, this peaceful world could never exist. Just as I reached this conclusion, Takeshi, who was cheerfully talking with everyone, suddenly started to decompose with a horrible sound. His skin became soggy and peeled off by itself. His exposed muscle fibers became dark and putrid, their surface flaking away. His cells started to dissolve and run like mud dripping to the ground. His abdomen burst open, spilling his internal organs. His hair fell out in chunks, exposing the white skull underneath. All that was left were white bones with pieces of red flesh stuck to them. Eventually, even his skeleton collapsed with a dry sound, and at the same time, Coco disappeared without a sound. Confused, Hokuto and I flew back to 2017. Yusei Harukana was still standing in the same place. We're doing all this to save Takeshi and Coco. It looks like it's harder than we thought it would be. Bye!